The first session will address the theme of earthquake risk reduction. It will be chaired by Mr. B.H. Anil Kumar, Executive Director, NIDM. The panelists are as follows: Professor Santosh Kumar, Professor, National Institute of Disaster Management; Professor Ravi Sinha, Professor, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay; Dr. O.P. Mishra, Scientist, Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India; Professor Amrita Singh, Chairman, Special Center for Disaster Research, JNU. I now hand over the proceedings to the Chairman, Mr. Anil Kumar. So over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Without wasting much time, I would not like to make any introductory comments. Uh, I would now request Professor Amita Singh, who is the chairman of the Special Center for Disaster Research, JNU, to give her remarks, please. Either sit here and talk, or you can use the podium. I think we have 10 minutes each.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Kumar ji, for being very kind, allowing me to speak in the beginning. And my apologies to everyone here, because today is a very important day for JNU, because our center's first examination system and admission policy and prospectuses, everything is going online. And as a chairperson, I don't want to lose out on that and make sure that everything is there. So please excuse me. I'll be leaving after this at 12 o'clock. I have to reach there. So thank you very much. There are 2-3 things that are consistently, troubling as an ordinary citizen. You would know that the center has 7 faculty members drawn over the period of time as and when the need arose for a particular gap filling in our understanding on the disaster. And now we have faculty from information and communication technology, artificial intelligence, computational modeling, and we are graduating to a number of things. But we started in a very mild manner in, after whatever happened in Uttarakhand in 2013. And that shook our conscience, and we said that we need to desensitize the whole process of disaster management. And when I say desensitize, we need to take it to common people. We need to make them understand. And the understanding has already developed, because we see the students sitting here and we see people who were never there in the inner circle now making inroads into our whole discourse process. I must congratulate Mr. K.M. Singh for this very, very important discussion, very timely intervention, and I suppose that the government takes note of it and really starts working on the deliberations and the findings that come out of this. Really, congratulations to you, Mr. Singh, and General Vij and Gupta ji, and everyone who's been associated with this. This should lead to a very important toolkit on how the SDMAs should be behaving when the disaster strikes, because we are not really pricking the SDMAs, which we are supposed to do. We should reach out to them. We end up like a talking shop in most of the cases, because it's like Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatters debate is going on. Something that happened once upon a time when the women's studies came up, once upon a time when inclusive governance came up. We were doing the same thing. So I think it's a transition we are making, and it should lead to a very important set. Now, what is, as an earthquake to a common man, what would it mean? We don't need statistics. We don't need, all that big data which is coming up. It's available to everyone. If you tell a student sitting here from the school to prepare a monograph of, 1,000 words on an earthquake, he will give you the best of the most relevant statistics, because it's all there. There are tracking companies, private companies, which are throwing data for sale on the net. So the relevance of data managers is gone. The relevance today is that of an administrator who has to implement. And those who have to implement should be in the core of the thick of the problem. Now, not every administrator will have the vision to implement it. I'll give you, something from the area that we worked in. A law is made that earthquake should not turn into a disaster. It's in the nature of the earth to shake. It's in the nature of the river to flow. It's in the nature of the mountains to slide down. There's nothing unusual about it. Nature reacts like that. It's not a disaster. We make it a disaster when we interfere with it in a manner for which we do not have the ecological right to do that. And now, who would find that ecological right? A law is made. For example, recently a law to prevent earthquake disasters was made in Haryana, where only 4 stories. They said, big thing that now we would not allow more than 4 stories. Now, the law doesn't define 4 stories would start from the basement or from the first floor or from above the first floor. So the towering inferno is going on extending. The law is also quite on the fact whether 4 stories on a 100-meter plot, on a 60-meter plot, or on a 1,000-meter plot. So again, it goes on, vertically. Then it also doesn't say that where would this be allowed in a density population of this sort or that sort. There's no mapping which is done. We must actually strike out maybe something like this, KM Singh Saab, something like this you should bring out from here, that SDMS should be preparing a map. And this should be a time bound map because we have very little time in this national territory to be waiting for the long discussions and many more workshops to come. We should immediately find some accountability paradigm for the SDMS where they should be giving back the mapping on the basis of where construction should take place and where the law should be asked to change. We must have some judicial members from the state judiciary who should be participating in the committee. You should all also have academia, and it should not be a hazard based approach because earthquakes is not a problem. Earthquake is not a problem. The thing is that, if you start taking, there is, say, for example, somebody is cutting the tree. Is tree a problem because the tree is in the middle of the road? Tree is not a problem. It's the nature of the person who's cutting the tree because he never thought of any alternative measure. There is an alternative measure to everything. There is a manner in which the nature reacts. Similarly, I would come to another thing. The other thing is that we have not been having, an institutional memory when we work. One administrator comes, he goes away. Now, whatever is done by the past administrators does not reach to the next one. So every time the next administrator says at the chest beating, I have done that. But there are so many in the past who've laid the carpet for him to walk smoothly. We forget them. Why do we create new committees when there is enough information left, and why can't we start from that? And this is a typically Indian divisive mentality. And I do say it without mincing words because time is short and I can't be really lucid in my expressions. And I do say it because we are not learning to collaborate. We are spending more time pulling the other person down than to facilitate whoever is doing the work. There is, in every office, there is a team that is very speedy, working fast. And there is a small team which is also continuously working to pull them down. How to obstruct, how to block, how to do this, how to do that. And this is how the work never moves on. Then the administrator changes. So, earthquake or any other disaster anywhere in this country will not be resolved unless we resolve our ethics. And the last part is ethics. When I talk about ethics, it's about, the framework in which we design a policy. When we design a policy, who are designing it? There was a fantastic, Mr. Jain's morning speech, and I am fully agreeable to it. It's a wonderful speech. There is an implementation problem, and the administrator has very little to do with it. The moment a ward councillor wins an election. In the next 6 months, all the green areas are covered. Everyone comes with a speedy construction ceremonies. And there is a law, and the chief minister declares that this period will be no construction period. Nobody would be allowed to construct because there is no groundwater, there is the haze and all these problems. So no. But you know what the person at the ground says? He says, by the time they would identify me in this corner of the city and send their officials, my construction would be complete. Day and night they build, and the building is complete by the time the official reaches there. And the official intentionally delays because there is no accountability system, there is nobody to hold him through the neck, there is no timeline structures in district administration. We have a basic flaw with district administrative system. If only we had more ethical people running the districts, we would have earthquake engineering in a much better way, in which the scientist would also find relevance that he is contributing to humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Amita Singh. I think she has hit the nail on the head by saying that we need to take earthquake management to the common man, to the man on the street. And also, thank you once again for bringing into the fore that what is required is institutional memory, which will ensure that there's continuity of whatever we are trying to do, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel again and again. Now I call upon Professor Santosh Kumar to talk on the gaps in the current earthquake disaster management policy.
Thank you, Chair. Friend, although I have brought PowerPoint presentation, but I thought in 10 minutes it's better to speak from the heart. That would be better. पहले तो मैं बच्चों से शुरुआत करूंगा क्योंकि ये फ्यूचर जनरेशन हमारे सामने बैठा हुआ है और जो रिस्क हम एक जनरेशन से दूसरे जनरेशन को ट्रांसफर कर रहे हैं उसकी चिंता के लिए हम लोग यहाँ बैठे हैं. जैसा जैन साहब ने शुरू में कहा कि 90% पॉपुलेशन, मोर देन 80 to 90% पॉपुलेशन हमारे रिस्क एरिया में है, तो इसका मतलब है कि करीब करीब हमारे 90 करोड़ और करीब करीब 100 करोड़ लोग इस तरह के डिजास्टर प्रोन, अर्थक्वेक प्रोन एरियाज में रह रहे हैं, जिसमें 60% यूथ होंगे और 20% बच्चे होंगे. शुरुआत ये है कि इनकी नजर हम पे लगी है कि हमें एक रिस्क प्रोन एरिया दे रहे हैं रहने के लिए या रिस्क रिजिलियंट एरिया दे रहे हैं रहने के लिए. ये हमारे जनरेशन की जिम्मेदारी है कि इसको ट्रांसफर करें. तो पहली बात यही बात होगी कि किस तरह से अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इस जनरेशन निभा सकती है विद आवर एंटायर इंस्टीट्यूशनल सिस्टम मैकेनिज्म और द न्यू दिस पैराडाइम शिफ्ट. So this is one thing, that how we are transferring our risks to the new generation, whether the enhanced risk or the same risk or the reduced risk. This is one challenge. I remember that one book is written, Black Swan, and that is important to quote here. What we know is fine, but is always venture out in those areas which we do not know. An earthquake has brought many surprises all across the globe. So we need to be prepared for those kind of a surprises which we have not accounted so far or not we have faced so far. Meaning thereby taking example from Japan, that Japan earthquake induced tsunami and then nuclear emergency, and after that 4 days of total blackout without electricity. Here in India, if you see that entire ring of fire is garlanding the entire mountain area from west to the east to the top north and also across the coast areas. So you'll see that our vulnerability in that case, that what kind of a possible interlinked kind of a disaster or risk which earthquake would generate. We need to also integrate those risks together. And most of the time what is happening, that risk what is known to us remain known to us only. It doesn't go into the public domain. So many of the states have drafted those risk atlas, and many of the institutions have made those kind of a risk atlas, but it has not gone to the people down the lane, so that they can start making investment and preparing themselves for risk reduction. So this is my second point. So third point is this, that paradigm shift, we require another paradigm shift. One paradigm shift, we had a prevention and mitigation from relief to response. Now, another is that what we see is across the globe and India also, we have seen that what kind of an impact earthquake has created so far. And we find is a complete failure of structures. So this is a challenge to the infrastructure sector and the people who are dealing with the structures, how to improve that. When we are talking about failure of structures, that what kind of a mechanism, what are the institutional system, what are the curriculum, what are the things they have to be brought, that is to be seen sincerely, because India has a large number of institutions dealing with the structures and they are of world class. So where it is happening, so where it is going wrong. So there's another paradigm shift required. What Amita Singh said is does not focus on a structure alone, but start focusing on the people also. So people centric approach, and then we go for the structure. The third point which I would like to highlight in terms of that what task is unfulfilled. And those unfulfilled tasks, I would just quote what has been there, the critical areas of concern in the NDMA guidelines that need to be addressed because already over more than 10 years. A certain lack of awareness amongst the people. This is the top priority. So how and what kind of a system which we are designing so that each people, 90% population, any of the institutional system will not be able to reach out to the 90% of the people of India and say that do the risk reduction. So how we are, any government capacity is also not there to go for risk reduction for all 90% population. So the idea is to how engage community, engage people in this particular. This is the serious gap which we are seeing in the last 10 years. Our public awareness system or mechanism has not been so strong, which can even talk about that. Even children are there. We can ask that, do you know about the earthquake and all? Probably might not be able to these do's and don'ts what we are talking about. But if you talk about environment, everybody will say that yes. So the task is that learning, drawing learning from other sector and what they have been able to do and where that disaster management sector also to learn. So these have listed out 5 6, so I am not quoting that. What I'm saying is there's a top priority of public awareness that to be taken up. Now coming to the priorities, when we are looking at which are the sectors to be taken on priority, from where we have to go, and we see this that most of the disaster scenario in the earthquake, post-earthquake, again 70% of the coming from the housing. Amongst the infrastructure also, the housing is the top priority. So meaning thereby how we are going to see that housing structure and what are the strategy. So how to incentivize risk reduction. Incentivizing risk reduction probably would pay in terms of like we say that 5,000 crore earthquake project, national earthquake project, if you take, probably it will not yield any result for the type of risk which we have. Maybe we need to incentivize if somebody is taking risk reduction measures, whether financial, whether kind of a social, whatever recognition, we have to work on the incentive mechanism for disaster risk reduction, which may be earthquake on the given top priority. Another point which I would like to highlight in terms of the example of Japan. So the Japan is this in the sense we are saying that on the 11th of March 2011, people of Japan faced this disaster. But on the 10th of March, they did not know that what will happen on the 11th. So what I'm saying is, on the 11th, they all faced this situation and realized what is there. But on the 10th, they were not knowing what is going to happen in Japan on the 11th March. Similarly, 25th January 2001, Gujarat did not know that what is going to happen on 26th January. So the point which I'm trying to make here is with these two examples that we need to acknowledge the uncertainties of earthquake and we do not have much time. What we are saying that complacency should not be there, that we have enough time to prepare for earthquake. We have to think that it is going to happen even tomorrow or maybe by this evening, God forbid. But this is the scenario in which we are living. Another point which I would like to highlight in terms of capacity development. So capacity development in terms of that community capacity development NDRF is doing. I take analogy from Kerala flood. And the Kerala flood, when we visited, our team visited there, and we found extraordinarily immediate recovery was there. Extraordinarily, I have not seen that kind of a immediate recovery anywhere, any part of the country, soon after that disaster, although it was a flood. But what I'm saying, what did work? That is to be noted very, very important. And that's community comradeship was very, very kind of a important point to be emulated. So what I'm saying is, again, this rebuilding and talking about reinforcing that how that community and individual engagement, community institutions, that to be brought in the policy format, that how we are going to engage them and what kind of a role. So that government is thinking of sustaining that volunteerism. So in disaster management, maybe in our country, we can create those kind of a volunteers across the country and think that how the best of the capacity which has been built over the years, their experiences can be taken up into the entire format. I would stop here and maybe because time is running out. And so anything which will come with the question, I would take up. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Professor Santosh, for bringing to the fore the issue that we need to prioritize our intervention and concentrate on them, and not only waive the penalty on the provisions on the defaulters, but also incentivize people who actually take up disaster risk reduction. I would now call on the next speaker, Professor Scientist Sri Mishra, to make his presentation. He'll talk. Yeah, ठीक है. आप करते हैं. He's got a PowerPoint presentation which he'll present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respected stalwarts of the disaster risk management, affiliated to different past and present institutions like NDMA, NIDM, BMSDA, IITs, several my colleagues, and most glorifying thing that the students are here, as Professor Santosh Kumar mentioned, that they are the future of the country. I'm a little bit upset because I'm a scientist and I'm an academician, so I love to speak the basics of the subject. So please allow me to give some time, and I'm sure I'm not going to bore you. So this topic is a very burning topic, and it is appropriately taken up. And if you see that, the keywords, the earthquake prediction, seismic microgeology, and sensitization. So it is the scientific engineering, and then it is the policy. And that is actually crux of the organizing this workshop. So the students know that the earthquake is the most uncertain, sudden, and very, very huge energy generating natural phenomena. That's why it is called a most unalarming culprit that can harm anything transboundary. There is no geographical boundary that it is there is no any type of the edging that if it is the rich country, I will not hit there, the poor country, I will hit there. It is a very, 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 very transparent and very, they can hit anywhere in any part of the country, and that's why it is called a transboundary disaster event. So if you come to there, then how to reduce the earthquake seismic hazards? Either predict or forecast the earthquake, or development of the earthquake early warning system, or development of the earthquake risk resilient structure, design the role of the seismic microgenesis, and I will speak on this. So if you take this, that students are here, that what is the earthquake? Earthquake is nothing but it is the heart attack of the earth. Why? Because it has a lot of the similarity between the human anatomy. We know that if the systolic and diastolic pressures abnormally high, then the person's collapse because of it has exceeded the limit of the artery and vein of the blood pumping. Similarly, if the shearing and the bearing strength of the rock is exceeded by the stress accumulation and stress energy generation, then the rock breaks. That is called a brittle failure. And that is the shaking of the earth we feel when the rock breaks. So this is the almost, sometimes there is a major earthquake, means like massive heart attack. There is a micro and the minor earthquake. This is a minor attack. And there is sometimes symptom, you have a chest pain, so you can say that there is something going on in the heart. There is suddenly no any information, so the person collapse. Earthquake behave in the similar way. There is a lot of the series of the micro earthquakes taking place. Sometimes the main shocks hits. We have seen the Sulawesi, we have seen the Indonesia, we have seen the Japan, in India also. I'll give some example. But most of the cases, it is unalarming. So the foreshocks are only detected after the occurrence of the main shock. We used to say that this is the foreshock. And if you can detect the foreshock, then you can say that the main shock is going to happen. And that is the tragedy in the earthquake prediction and the forecasting system. So this is very good analogy. Now doctors, medical practitioners, Dr. Amita Sahib is here, that they 100 years ago, they don't know the mechanism of the heart function. But now our doctors, medical experts understand that how the heart functions. And they now predict the collapse of the heart. So if the scientific validity of the theory there, then can we not predict the earthquake? I think this is the big questions. That can we not predict the earthquake if this is there? And you see that this type of the recording, just like ECG, you can put that. This is you remember that this is the seismograph and there's the recorder. So there's the entire system there. So it is very similar to a cardiogram and seismogram. I have taken an example. This is a cardiogram of my father of 87 years old. You can see this cardiogram just like the record of the pulsage of the heart recorded by electrical cardiogram, and this is seismogram. So now the analogy sets that, and we are working that why not we can predict the earthquake. This is the big problem. But human anatomy is very simple to understand, but earth is as such a so heterogeneous, complex, intricate that its processes is not able to understand the present state of the knowledge. That is the crux. We are studying data generation, new data generation. This is the research. And that's why we are able to understand the processes if we have continuous monitoring for that. So can we predict the earthquake? This is the there that if the people ask in the United UNIS, their meeting when I was there in Geneva, they asked that a very common practitioner that if you validation of scientific theory involves predictability, we can predict the earthquake. If you cannot predict the earthquake, then how good seismologist are you? That is quite natural. But this question shows that there is a huge perception gap between the common public who are sufferer, or even the scientific or engineering community who are also sufferer, and the scientific and engineering background of a study going on to understand the mechanism of the earthquake. That is a huge perception gap. They are not understanding that why we are not able to predict the earthquake. And that's why the pouring of the huge amount of the money all over the globe to understand the generating processes of the earthquake. I will show you that occurring in the same place of the different time. So it is very difficult to find out what are the diagnostic property of the earthquake generations, or what is the generation and what is the diagnostic property that which stress the rock is going to break. Theoretically, you know that the granite is breaking on this amount of energy, and the other host rocks are breaking on this type of energy and stress, but it is not happening in that. That is the biggest problem. So if you see that the China in the 1975 claimed that they have predicted the earthquake, and the entire world was celebrating that yes, we succeeded. Particularly scientific community, everybody happy that the world has now the predictive tool of the 1975 Haicheng earthquake, and it worked really. But just after 1 year, what happens in Tangshan earthquake? By the same equal to group of the scientists who are working in the Japan, in the China, and there is just a 300 kilometer, less than 300 kilometer distance between the Haicheng and Tangshan. They found that entire structures it turned into rubles. That means here the predictive mechanism and the predictive parameters that Haicheng earthquake they described by the same group of scientists is miserably failed. That means there is something intricate issues which needs to be addressed. So you can say that we are seismological, we have not doing any type of we have not achieved anything in the prediction. We have achieved in the prediction. I will show you that how far we achieved. In any predictive step, there is the 4 stages. First step is the anticipation. We have a zonation map, we have the demarcation seismic zone, we have the plate tectonics, we have everything. We can anticipate that the collision and subduction zone of the Himalaya and the subduction zone of the Andaman Nicobar is the most prone earthquake generating environment of the country. That is done by the seismologist, and that done by the geological community to find out, to understand the earthquake plate interactions, plate divergence, the going and inside, subduction and abducting is all processes that demarcate, and it is happening. And then they anticipate that earthquake occur there. After anticipation, they have justification. There is a long gap in the earthquake occurrence of that magnitude of earthquake, energy released and somewhere accumulated, maybe chances of the release of the energy. So they give the justification with the parameter estimations. And third stage is the expectation, that we expect that, oh, it is long done. So what could be there in the Himalaya is going to the rock earthquake. We have seen that a lot of the times Bilham telling that the Bhutan is going to have a big earthquake, the Sikkim has going to a big earthquake, this, that. They expect it through some parameters. But this is the 3 steps the scientists and the engineers able to correlate that yes, prediction is achieved to that stage. So prediction or prediction scientists are not failure, but still they still to the third step. But fourth step is mostly the authentications in terms of the space, time, and the strength. And that is the biggest thing. Just like a doctor can say that I am a good surgeon, I can operate the heart of the Indians, not of the Americans. That is not a good doctor, right? So the predictor can be the earthquake. He will understand that if he knows the earthquake predictions, he can predict the similar type of earthquake of the analogous tectonics in the any part of the globe. That is the need of the scientific validations, and that we are the lagging behind. So the question arises that different type of earthquakes, and India is the good laboratory of the different types of earthquakes. Just like earthquake in Himalayan region, polyton subduction tectonics. Earthquake in Andaman Nicobar, subduction tectonics. Earthquakes in plate interiors, in situ material heterogeneity. Earthquake reservoir induced earthquake, volcanic induced earthquake, earthquake due to rock burst, and now we have proved that monsoon induced earthquake. A paper published in the monsoon in the tectonophysics, that how the Talala area, if the monsoon exceeded, the modulation of the seismicity taking place. And we also proved that climate change also modulated the degree of seismicity, melting of the ice, then the thrusting of the pressures from the above to the crust is also now loosening up, and then it was the spring type of the bump up, and then there is a rock breaking taking place. So these are there, and they have the different frequencies, so different energy. We have seen that high frequency, low frequency. So almost all disasters are not disastrous, because only those is equal to earthquakes which have high magnitude, shallow depth is the equal to disaster happening. So development of the earthquake warning, I think the people earthquake early warning, it is a misnomer. We are not going to earthquake early warning. We are giving the early warning for the disastrous phases of the earthquake. Because after the occurrence of the earthquake, we can say that the S may become, the surface may become, and then the damage happens. So it is the disastrous phase early warning, not the earthquake early warning. So development of this seismic zone map is there. If this zone map is correct, then the disaster of the building, of the damage of the building, of the same typology, same design, same material is the same. But we are finding that the building is collapsed differently in the different corner. So that's why the concept is equal to of the occurrence of the earthquake seismic hazards is so much intricate dispute of the lineament of the faults, factory of the laser folio of the lineaments, all are there. These are the all, even the interior part which earlier says that it's very stable, it is not also valid. So found some subductions I have already mentioned. You have seen the Nepal earthquake. So Himalaya is very vulnerable. So disaster hazard map they made. And if you see the disaster hazard map of the country, we need that the zone is valid for the rock cases. It is for a maximum credible earthquake. But this zone is valid, then the damage pattern is also different. You can see that the Bhuj earthquake, the most well-built structures is very near to the is away from the main shock, is raised to the ground. But very dilapidated and bad structure very near to the main shock is still stand still. So you can see the difference in the Muzaffarabad earthquake. School-going children is trapped, and this is well-built engineering design structure could not predict the earthquake. But you can see that here the one multi-story structure is stand still. The question arises, what was the actually cause? See this transboundary Uri and Muzaffarabad, the Sikkim earthquake of the Nepal, the disaster there. See well-built structure, there is no foundational design, even if it is the hydrostatic pressure and the micro tremor. So that's why we consider that the building, and now we consider that the concept of the microdonations is the zonification. You see this is the concept of microdonation for children. This is donation map, now microdonation. You see this cartoon, you can see that one tree has no effect of shaking, 3 trees has a shaking effect, but one tree is falling in the ground, and that is the beauty of the zone. In the one zone, it is behave like this. Shaking has a different, and what is the reason? It is geomechanical, soil mechanical strength, amplification, and different frequency. And so we found that the soil in subsurface is main culprit who can amplify, who can de-amplify, and which can behave in accelerated way and causing all this. That's why the microdonation concept there. I've given all the PowerPoint for making the reports. So we have to do the zonation, and Ministry of Earth Sciences, so many parameters we are creating, and we are the nodal agency of doing the seismic microdonation of the country. That's why like the GSI and landslide, we have the donation map, and we got almost all technical parameters to find this. There is there. Sir, 1 minute. Most important policy type of things. We have the we have to do the total of the 30 stations in the first phase of the microdonation, and then we are already the lines we have already completed. Red is to be completed, and it is going on. That was the the green one, and we determined the seismic microdonation to find out at what frequency, what is the maximum amplifications, and we did it. So Policysensitization means we need to have to use the safeguard that their almost data should be used to reduce the hazards. And if disaster cycle is correct, we are only preparedness, preventions, and then the response. Here need that we need to have a response. We are the Japanese are very responsive to preparedness and prevention, less responsive to the post disaster. India is the best in the post disaster. That's why Japanese needs the help from the India. But we are sitting, if the earthquake happens, then we will look into that. So this is the case that we published this paper now. Srivastava and myself, he is a PhD thesis, that there is the ADR, anti-disaster response, this is a DDR, during disaster response, and there is the PDR, this is post-disaster response. So response means it is the response at every time there is no rest, that if the earthquake happens, then only the responsive force. And we have to make the course, so we have risk resilient, and risk resilient, not risk proof, because it is dynamic strength. So we have to generate a sound building code, which you can use it, and that is the way forward I have given. Ministry of Earth Sciences has developed the handbook as well as the field manual, so that the systematic microzoning of the country can be done. And we are doing all the way forward mentioned here, that building design code written. And if it happens, I was in the United ISDR team to find out the Sendai 1 year. We found that, you see this, the building is standing still, there is no damage, only all damage happened at the hydrostatic tsunami pressures. And this building design code is the building of the Sendai. They prove that if the building design code is sound, none of the shaking of that magnitude will able to raise the structure to ground. That means scientifically we achieved that if the building design code is sound, we are able to save the structure. And that's why this is the model city. Sendai has no damage of any building happens there. And that's why if you have safe city, it is after just 1 year, that this is the city of the Sendai. There is no any work that the earthquake disaster happened in 2011. And this is my 7 years experience in Japan, because it is my special subject, PhD and DSc I have done there. I was visiting professor over there and found out they have the good coordination of the policy, planning, scientist, and engineer. It should not be isolation, and the continued research is needed. Thank you very much. Now I call on Dr.
Bombay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, this is the last presentation. I would focus a bit more deeply on policy issues, and particularly related to why we should have policy and what are the things to look for when we try to consider the aspects to which the policy making goes. So for that, I just want to quickly recap the changing landscape. So disaster risk management, or disaster management as it is currently known worldwide, actually has a genesis not very long ago, just 30 years ago, when the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction was first approved by the UN General Assembly, and then 1990s was considered as the decade for the natural disaster reduction. And the key point over there is that it was recognized that disaster management is a non-routine governance activity. That was a very, very big paradigm shift at that time. And within India also, there was recognition that although disaster management is not mentioned in the 7th schedule, even then it is going to be a distinct activity to be taken by the government. And also an important and interesting fact was the formation of the National Center for Disaster Management under IIPA in the year 1995. Then in 1994, we had the Yokohama strategy, the first global strategy for disaster risk reduction. Some keywords which we still use came out from that: mainstreaming, encouraging community involvement. And in India, in 1999, after the Odisha super cyclone, we had the High Power Committee on Disaster Management under Mr. J.C. Pant, who was earlier Secretary Agriculture at that time. And it recommended setting up a disaster management ministry. It recommended a paradigm shift towards preparedness and risk reduction, and strongly recommended community involvement. These are all important points in the sense that these were not in the forefront of the thinking until these things happened. Then in 2001, the National Committee on Disaster Management was set up with the Prime Minister as the chairman and Mr. Sharad Pawar as the vice chairman. And it broadly endorsed the High Power Committee recommendations. It also recommended a parliamentary act on disaster management. It recommended establishing a separate institutional structure for disaster management and shifting of disaster management from the Ministry of Agriculture to Ministry of Home Affairs. Each one of them are actually paradigm shifts in the way we have evolved in our disaster management structure. In 2005, we had 10 years after the Yokohama strategy, we have the Hyogo Framework for Action, which specified certain gaps and challenges, recognized that deaths are reducing, but the economic losses are increasing, and that is reaching a non-sustainable level. and advocated understanding risk and community-based disaster management approach. So the basic thing. So of course, these international agreements always have many components, but I'm just pulling out the one which are most relevant for policy making. So the key point was that there was an understanding that somehow or the other death reduction is a problem which we have a better handle on than bearing the cost of disasters. So now the focus also has to be on how to reduce the cost of disasters. Uh, in India, the Disaster Management Act was enacted, as everybody knows here, and the National Disaster Management Authority was set up, and it provided a legal framework for disaster management in the country. The Disaster Management Act created several institutional mechanisms besides NDMA. There's NIDM, there is NDRF, and then also at the state level and at the local level, there are these mechanisms which have been set up. And again, recommended very specifically a paradigm shift to mitigation and preparedness. And some of the key landmarks which have happened since this were the preparation of the National Policy on Disaster Management and the National Disaster Management Plan. A number of guidelines, as mentioned earlier in the opening session by General Vij and others, regarding the important guidelines which have been issued since then. And then 3 years ago, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction for the time span of 2015 to 2030, which again have a number of targets, number of priorities, and also implementation guidelines. So what I'm trying to say in the last 3 minutes actually is that there is this big change happening. And if we can quickly recapitulate, then the international change which is happening is the recognition that disaster management is a distinct activity. Didn't happen very long ago, hardly 30 years ago. The recognition of the need to establish institutional mechanisms, recognizing that we also need to focus on mitigation and preparedness as specific focus activities, and also that we cannot just implement program if we are not able to measure the success. So there has to be targets and metrics of success. So this has been the big change in the landscape of disaster risk management internationally. In India, it's a parallel change, but on a slightly different track. So of course, we also recognize disaster management as a distinct activity. Legal frameworks are there. Institutions at both national and state levels have been established to a certain extent. Implementation plans and initiatives have also been taken up to a certain scale. Now, this is all that which has happened in the last 30 years. But we as a country are also changing. So the question is that what is happening in the domain of disaster management? Is it sync with what is happening in the country as a whole? Because the two have to match. Otherwise, always the expectations are going to be higher than what we are capable of doing. So if you just look at India, so this is just the GDP of India. So from 1998 to 2018. When the Disaster Management Act was enacted, this was our this was our GDP. And why I'm saying is that based on the thinking of the people, the understanding of the capacity of the nation at this time, we are right now in 2018, we are here. So we have to ask ourselves, is this relevant? Or do we need to relook? Maybe we need to be more ambitious. Maybe we need to be more focused, because as a country we have moved on since the time when the act was enacted. And also, if we look forward to the future, 2030, which is the end of the Sendai framework, India is going to be a 7.8 trillion economy. So anything which we do today, the young people who are here, when you are going to be working professionals, early working professionals in your life, at that time, what are going to be your expectations? Are we taking plans right now which is going to meet them? And it's not just the Indian economy, it's also the per capita income. So when the Disaster Management Act was passed, this was our per capita income. And again, the thinking was that what is it that you can do as a nation on the basis of the individual capacity at that level? Today, this is what we are. And the PricewaterhouseCoopers has estimated that in the year 2030, the per capita income would be nearly 4 times of today. So what is the capacity which would be there at that time? And can we have the disaster management systems being put in place which will properly leverage that capacity? So what I'm trying to say through this is that as a nation, we feel proud that we are rising. And in the domain of what is rising, national prosperity is rising, personal incomes are rising, economic development are rising. our confidence as society and our expectations as people are rising. And also, we are having a much greater prestige internationally. So, what we do in disaster management actually uh, has to strengthen all of these. And it is not just looking back to see what we were not doing earlier, but it's also looking forward to how we are changing as a nation, which we need to respond to even in the domain of disaster risk management. So, what are the opportunities that we have? We need to have the disaster management policies. We need to take into account the best of international policies, best of India's economic strength as it is going to be in the future, and society's aspirations as it is going to be in the future. Not in the past, not present, but in the future. So, disaster management policy needs to be future driven. This is where we are now. And by the time we plan things, by the time we go through all the approvals and launch the scheme, and by the time the scheme or the program gets over, this is where we are going to be. So our plan of today has to be structured in a way where we meet the requirements over there. And this is something which I feel as a very strong recommendation for the consideration that how we can all put our heads together so we start thinking about this in a more coherent fashion and be able to meet these requirements. Otherwise, the youth of today, when they look back 15, 30 years from now, they will say that we were tackling and spending all our time handling and trying to solve today's problem, and we totally forgot to look at the future. So the opportunities are that the DM policies need stronger recognition of the underlying causes. We need to understand the causes and how they are changing over time. We need to enable both strategic and and tactical programs. Right now, there is an overemphasis on tactical programs and plans. We need to focus more on strategic initiatives also. And we should encourage institutional building because that provides islands of excellence. It allows the opportunity to leverage institutional memory, and it allows developing highly trained and motivated human resources who are champions in disaster management in every wake of life. We cannot do mainstreaming until everybody who's doing whatever job they are doing are also more aware of disaster management. So, just my closing thoughts that the world and India have made tremendous progress in the last 30 years, but the world is moving from disaster management to disaster risk reduction very, very strongly. We need to also look into that more seriously. Risk reduction requires holistic approach, incorporating all stakeholders. This is again something which we have to move in that right direction. And while India is currently providing greater focus on mitigation and preparedness, we need to have a proper way of building on the successes we have done in the last 20, 30 years. Formation of NDMA, the activities of the Ministry of Home Affairs after disaster management shifted from agriculture to MHA. These are all seminal benchmarks in our success in the past. But we cannot sit back on that. We need to be more focused on how we can leverage them and meet much higher expectations of the society in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sinha, for bringing to our notice that we need to look at the aspirations of society for the future and incorporate them into our plans in the present. I think that is a very, very key takeaway. Now, I would like to throw the house open for discussion. I think Dr. Arvind Gupta.
Thank you very much for these four excellent presentations. Now, my question is about the predictions. We also hear that animals have some feeling for the oncoming earthquakes. So, how developed is that science? That is one thing if you could address. And my second question is, in Delhi we are building this metro, huge. How safe or how earthquake proof is this massive infrastructure that we have built in the shape of metros? Thank you. metro lines, I mean. Railway lines.
Okay. It is really, sir, thank you very much. Uh, the science of the predictions actually started from the perception organ of the animals. Uh, Animals as well as the some tribal people who have their idea about in the Jarvas, you have seen that. I will discuss one example. Uh, because of the generation of the stress in the subsurface, there is some radioactive elements, gases like helium, argon. They wanted to come out, and that was the actually started to perceived by those animals, or some commotional phenomena in the subsurface and above the surface in atmosphere. They started to understand due to their uneasiness, because if the stress build-up taking place, it was the interaction with the exosphere and the electromagnetic wave. So now it has been proved that. So this is the actually the science in a very nascent stage, but that abnormality of the animal prior to occurrence of the earthquake has the scientific justifications fully. Not a lot of the research is going on, but some it is not a very authenticated that it is always, because it depends on the type, the earthquake and the area, and the perceptions of the animal. So this was the varying from place to place, the animal to animal, and all this. So we are not generalizing that this is one of the precursor, but it is not the failed whenever there is abnormality of the animal. In the Andaman Nicobar, when we were working, there is the Jarvas. They already sensed the 1 day before that the tsunami is going to happen, and that is actually the documented story noted by when we are doing the after shock monitoring in 2005 in the December, that they sense sometimes, because they learned from their ancestors that whenever there is some tidal type of the things in the Indian Ocean, in the Andaman Nicobar, what was their symptoms there. So this is the fact that some perceptible organs, just like experience, they are not telling, so they have their experience, some they're expressing. So animals are the same type of things. So it is their perceptions organs, they're able to do that. So still biologists are working on that. That's why the biologists and seismologists are working in the earthquake prone area in Indonesia. In the USA, there is the ornithologist. There is a lot of things there. Regarding the Delhi seismic microgeneration, is done by the government of India, Ministry of Earth Sciences. We released that report in 2016 February, and before the taking of the metro project, there is a huge geotechnical investigations done in the NCR area, and they found the all the standard penetration test and the geomechanical strength of soil, the amplification parameters. So they able to did all the engineering and geophysical seismological investigation. They did it, and whatever we did the microgeneration, we also try to find out the area, the boreholes data and laboratory and the field experiments. So I think we have felt that Nepal earthquake happened. There is a shaking, a strong shaking. In Afghanistan, in the Hindu Kush earthquake happened. There is a shaking in Delhi, but metro were the safe. So we have already got the testimony that the metro is the safer. What happens in the Nepal earthquake is a huge shaking, huge amount of energy propagated to the Indian territory, particularly in the Delhi. So the safety wise, I think we achieved. There is nothing to worry for that. But microgeneration also we have done. Now we are the microgeneration trying to give to the all stakeholders to use that parameter for the seismic microgenerations of the further new building design code. What Jain Saab was also mentioned. So these are the thanks.
Can you introduce yourself and then put your question, please?
My name is BKP Sinha. I'm Amita University and I am from forestry profession. My question is that through all these things, what runs as a central thread is a resilience of the community, resilience of the system. For building construction also, if we use bamboo, for example, it is much more resilient than the concrete and the damage will be also less. But we don't use bamboo. Number two, if in the system we have a huge grid, if the one grid fails, the electricity fails throughout. If we have microgrids based on the natural resources, based on hydropower or whatever is available, this disaster will not happen, or it will be happen to a reduced extent. Number three, about the GDP. Yes, the GDP is rising, the per capita income is rising also. But what is being ignored is the disparity in income of the people, and disparity, intergenerational disparity, it is going to cause. When there is a huge intergenerational disparity, the natural resources will be the first casualty. And you should remember that it is in the case of disaster, it is the natural resources which comes to aid as a first hand. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think one more question. Yeah.
Hi, Muzaffar. This is for Dr. Mishra. Dr. Mishra, you mentioned about the microzonation. See, microzonation takes a lot of time. And especially in the vulnerable areas, large number of projects have come up on the fault lines. The example is Guwahati Airport. After constructing the airport, it is that the airport is on the fault line. Can we have a system where the microzonation, especially in the vulnerable states, takes less time? It takes large number of years for microzonation of especially vulnerable areas.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can answer, and then we'll take.
It is really a very good question. The problem is that I have told the framework of the microzonation has 72 parameters. It has 72 parameters, and very systematic we have to do, because we are going to generate a code to be used for the future resilience. So it is not so. Once the work is started, the bigger city, we have already, I have shown some, not time to there. The bigger city of the 350 square kilometer area, it takes a maximum all parameters in 2 years for the compilation. Many cities has been covered by some institutions and some other organizations. Those data has been used to curtail the time, because duplicacy avoided, to make the seismic microzone map of that city. So, sir, earlier you were right, 2012 to 2017, as 2017 we have to complete the microzonation as NDMA interested us, but we are not able to do because of the lot of the financial and so many problems are there. But now Professor Murthy is the chairman of Technical Committee of Seismic Microzonation by MOES. We have able to award the work, the global technical expertise, and we are doing it. Hopefully, we have completed 5-6 cities. Calcutta we have completed, Delhi we have completed, Jabalpur completed, the Bangalore has already been done. So these all are the doing. So we have to have a patience, because we are thinking for the future generation resilience. So time is the important for the risk coverage, so risk reduction. So that is the things.
Thank you. Can you on that rise in disparities of.
No, so also regarding the question regarding bamboo and all, the choice of construction material is based on many factors, including the availability, including the difference between the construction cost to land cost, so that how high you can go and so on. So normally this would always be a more complex decision than just looking at whether the material is suitable from one point of view. So when people invest their money in housing, it would be on the basis of meeting many of their requirements. So that's why you are not likely to see massive construction in bamboo in India. Also regarding your point regarding electricity grid and other networks, of their resilience is well taken. Networking and other such islanding and other such schemes are already in operation, at least in the metro areas, for the electricity grid, and similar kind of things would have to be extended. The other point regarding the increase in disparity is always a concern. When incomes rise globally, every country which moved from low income to mid income group or mid income to high income group did not have the entire society move at the same speed. So this has been a historical observation in the 19th and 20th century, and this will also be an observation. We should not be surprised in the 21st century in India, that different segments of society are going to grow at different speeds, and the social system would have to handle that and find a way out of it. This is not something which can be mandated. The society has to adjust to it and create its own mechanisms for safety valves and all.
Thank you. One more question.
Good morning. I'm Brigadier Kuldeep Singh from NDMA. I have, a continuation on what the Member Secretary of NDMA, Mr. Jain, and Professor Amita had said, and of course has been mentioned by Professor Sinha. I think one of the problems I personally think is in our planning is that we tend to focus too intensely on the subject itself without looking at the other external, associated driving factors. And it is so also with disaster management. Now, why is it that people are buying houses in multi-stories or flocking to the cities? That's and this issue of building a house of bamboo or going and staying in a single story house on a plot of land. I think one of the basic things we are not understanding is that in geopolitical terms, India is an island. In geopolitical terms, India is an island. There's no other place this population of 1.3 billion or 1.34 billion can go. And because the aspirations of the people are rising today, there's a massive conflict which we are not seeing, but the undercurrents of, there's a conflict going on between land that is required for agrarian purposes. Our food preferences have increased, our dietary preferences have improved. Land for infrastructure, land for industry, and of course, land for living spaces. Now, there is this intense conflict which is there, which is forcing people into, of course, multi-storied buildings. That is one part. The second part is this could have been avoided had our planning of roads been better. If you look at the United States after or just at the end of the Great Depression, they suddenly started making roads into nowhere, very wide roads going into nowhere. Or if you look at Australia, of course, Australia is a different example because it's just got a population of the size of Delhi and a continent. But what I'm trying to reinforce is that they had very good roads on which people could travel from the peripheries to the city centers and work and go back at good speeds. Today, we do not have that kind of urban planning. So the tendency of people is to cluster into cities. That is one part. The second part is that what was referred to as that, what are the alternatives to what nature does? Yes, one of the things that we can do is start making human settlement layers, which I don't think so any work has commenced. There is enough information in the geospatial domain which is available. That is one. Now we need to combine that and make that to demographics and start building up human settlement layers, which would be very effective in the case of disaster management and disaster risk reduction. The last point that I have is failure of structures. What we are trying to do, I feel, is that trying to amend a system which has not worked for the last 70 years. That's the point that was made by Professor Amita, trying to reinforce the same system again and again and again and again. That is, at the district level, they are not able to govern how the structure will be constructed. Well, there is a good example, perhaps we will like to consider that. And that is the concept of critical infrastructure protection unit. Now, that can't be put into place for small projects like my house, your house. We can't do that. But at the district level, one of the concepts is in the Western countries is that large projects, let's say a massive housing complex which is being built or a flyover that's being built, there will be a cost which the contractor will bear, or the builder, whosoever is building that building, or the government will bear in terms of experts. Now, these experts are not integral to the contractor, but let's say there's a flyover being built, the government hires a set of experts who report to them, and they are associated with the project from inception, and they carry out testing at every stage and report back. And this contract between the experts and the government would be in the form of a legal agreement that if they have lied or failed or taken bribes, then they are legal consequences, very serious legal consequences in that. And at the end of that, a separate expert takes over and vets what this first experts had done. So that is one example of what perhaps I think we could think of. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the last, students can ask the question.
Good morning. My name is Siddharth Padnani, and my question is for Sir Mishra sir. And in your PPT, there was a point that on-site earthquakes. So what do you mean by on-site earthquakes? They have a smaller range, or what kind of earthquakes they are?
Actually, that earthquake where you are going to, it is the earthquake zone where you are going to build the structure. Suppose you are going to build a structure in Himalaya, and Himalaya, though each and every territory has the propensity of the seismicity. So the site earthquake you are going to, if you are going to Delhi, Delhi is not a source zone of the earthquake. It is affected by the source zone of the Himalaya and the other surroundings. So the onset and the offset, that was the, so the design should be like that. So resilient structure in the Himalaya, because it is the site of the house of the earthquake, hottest spot of the earthquake. So it is just more resilient, different code than that of the off-site area. So that I want to mention. It's a very intelligent question. Thank you.
Last question. Pass the mic. Yeah, please.
सर मेरा नाम लक्की है और मेरा आपसे क्वेश्चन ये है कि ऐसा कोई भी डिवाइसेस अब तक क्यों नहीं बनाया गया या बनाया नहीं जा रहा कि जो कि पब्लिक प्लेसेस में सीधा पब्लिक को बता सके कि अर्थक्वेक आने वाला है या अर्थक्वेक आया है। सपोज करिए कोई एक गरीब फैमिली का मेंबर है, उसके घर पे टीवी नहीं है, तो उसको मीडिया से पता नहीं चल रहा कि अर्थक्वेक आया है, तो उसको कैसे पता चलेगा? कोई ऐसा डिवाइस बनाया जा सकता है कि जिससे सीधा चल सके पता?
आपने अर्थक्वेक अर्ली वार्निंग के बारे में बात किया है। देखो, अर्थक्वेक होने के पहले ये तो पता नहीं लगता है, लेकिन हम लोग सेस्मोलॉजिकल मॉनिटरिंग नेटवर्क जो है मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ अर्थ साइंसेज कर रही है, नेशनल सेंटर फॉर सेस्मोलॉजी, टू फाइंड इफ द अर्थक्वेक अकर्ड, देन द प्री अराइवल टाइम्स कम्स, वी लोकेट अर्थक्वेक कहां पर अर्थक्वेक कितना मैग्नीट्यूड का हुआ, कहां पर हुआ, लेट लॉन्ग क्या है, डेप्थ क्या है, और तब हमने पूरे स्टेक होल्डर को जितने होते हैं उनको खबर देते हैं। और ये रिस्पॉन्स टाइम जो रप्चर इनिशिएशन पी वेव और सेकेंडरी टर्शियरी वेव, सरफेस वेव, ये होता है डिजास्टर्स वेव। एक जैसे कि इनिशिएशन हुआ, इसके बाद जो है भयंकर होने वाला, उसका इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए अर्ली वार्निंग अभी बनाया जाएगा, लेकिन ऐसे अलार्म नहीं है। और आपके पास तो अर्ली वार्निंग है कि आप कहाँ रह रहे हो, ये अर्थक्वेक जोन है कि नहीं। अब आप जैसे मान लो कि बेंगलोर में रहोगे और आप फिर रहोगे वहां शिलोंग में, तो ऑटोमेटिकली आपकी अर्ली वार्निंग है कि आप अर्थक्वेक जोन में रह रहे हो, आपके स्ट्रक्चर जो उसी तरह से बनना चाहिए। अर्ली वार्निंग के लिए कोई अलार्म नहीं चाहिए, इट इज ऑलरेडी अलार्म, इट इज ऑलरेडी डिमार्केटेड। So this is the point, that you don't wait that alarm will come. One day you can predict the earthquake. Nobody knows. So this is the in an experimental stage. Just like I said, the doctor invented the heart attack processes, and they can now transplant the earth. So this is the thing for you.
Last question, please.
Thank you. I am Professor Amit Bose, consultant practicing in the disaster management area. My question is multiple questions. I'm trying to be squeezing it one. It is for Singh also has the similar kind of question. We are into a developmental phase, which Ravi Sinha also mentioned, where we are taking a huge long steps, larger steps to develop our growth speed. I just give you two examples, which is the currently going on project in the at a macro level in the country. One is the Amrut program, where 500 master plans are being prepared in the country. All the existing towns, 500 towns, all over the country, Amrit towns. Actually, more than 750 towns master plans are being done. 500 are compulsory with Amrit. Now, these towns are existing towns, small and big. Many of the towns are increasing their area. For example, let me take Jharkhand towns. Ranchi, for example, 300 square meter. They are planning for 650 square meter contiguous land, and so on. I'm just giving you just example. Now, these plans, so far, last 10, 15 years, we have not done the master planning. It was the development planning zone. We were with the city development plan, which was not a mandatory, not a statutory plan. Now, master plan is a statutory plan. Whatever we make it today for these 500 to 600 towns will be a legal document for the city to grow. Now, if the microzonation goes so slow, for one town we take 2 years, and we don't have so many teams to make microzonation for these 500 towns, are we not falling in the death trap? That is one. Because there is no dovetailing of what is going on at a macro level and what actually our ground reality and our resources available to us in terms of human resource and practical resource. That is the one thing. Second, we are into a big project that is going on, Prime Minister Awas Yojana, where crores and crores and crores of rupees are being spent. Has this been dovetailed into that? If not, then what are we doing? Third and final, my question is about the, for example, in the beginning, inaugural session, British decided not to construct anything along the Yamuna belt. You know, it is a liquefiable soil, all those things. In the metro that is going to have, we are going to have, or we are having, in fact, although partially it was answered, but personally, the metro hub has been created across the Yamuna on the land which was rejected for the previous projects in the same area by government of Delhi at that time, about 20 years back. So there is a dichotomy of the debate that we are having, and we are having the contradictory statements emanating from here only, and what is happening at the national level. This is a concern which, if anybody can answer.
Okay.
In fact, in my presentation, I have dealt with Amrit and others also. But important question which we are raising, that when we are talking about this planning and big, like smart cities and all the Prime Minister Awas Yojana and other infrastructure projects, which we are saying that $3 trillion we are going to spend by 2030. So if that is the estimate for infrastructure growth in this country, and we are talking about here earthquake, but country is prone to multi-hazard. So the dialogue which is going on with the government of India and also the authority, disaster authority and infrastructure, this consortium, the dialogue is to make this resilient and incorporate all those required recommendations which have been given into that city planning also. So what I'm saying is this: now earlier when the planning used to happen, this was not noted, and so that's what happening, that even if an infrastructure is coming in the flood prone area and also earthquake prone area, their construction is coming as an earthquake resistant kind of a technology, but not with the flood resistance. So idea is to have this as a kind of a consolidated in terms of a holistic way of planning. So that is what this NDMA has taken up with the government of India, Ministry of Urban Development, as for the CSS scheme. But it's although important to discuss and have a more of a kind of engagement with the state government. So that is also happening, but the pace is not that enough, which is we want, because many of the structure you said that microgenation is taking too much of time, and it's also very expensive business. So we have to find out solution, and many more presentations to come, maybe during the day, and most of the solution would be shared with all of you, and tomorrow also. So probably that would have answer, and what Brigadier Kuldeep had mentioned also about this, that some of the concerns which we have noted, it is already there in the tomorrow's presentation and day after presentation, maybe tomorrow's presentation, and then we will discuss and come out with the specific recommendation. But I would say here at the before chairman concludes this, in terms of, we also, like NIDM has developed a white paper on capacity development. So maybe similar kind of a white paper is needed for the construction industries, in terms of if we are focusing on the infrastructure development, knowing the status, what we have, and how we wish to go as the kind of country's GDP is going and aspirations. So thank you very much for this.
I would like to dispel the doubt about the seismic microregional time consuming. You see, we have already developed the already report given to Delhi Microgeneration, NCR Delhi, February 2016. I think implementation, generation of the parameter doing scientific investigation take its own course as per the handbook and the manual we developed on approval of the NDMA and all these things. It is a very scientific and technical. We know that in Japan take 10 years to find out a seismic microgeneration plan before it's the Shinkan Airways. Professor Ghosh knows that thing. And after that, they have the dynamic modulations of that after Awaji earthquake, Kobe earthquake, and then the Niigata earthquake, and every time they are modernizing. So you should not be impatient that give me the food so early and everything after that disastrous. So let the scientific and technical engineering solution should be the optimal mark, because it was the disastrous event. You should not be keep a people in dark that you can do 6 parameters out of 72 and tell that this is seismic microgeneration. It is not. I'm sorry. It is just 2 years of the post graduations. You can see, you go to the inter-gate admission, you pass out in 2 years, and you have a degree. So give me 2 years maximally, and minimum one year for the CTY. Second thing, I think Kuldeep Singh has really pointed out nicely. Here, there is a perception gap of the scientific, technical, and the planner and the implementer. There should be a legal as well as financial safeguard